Have you seen PeopleSoft Search in 859? It's the new way to navigate PeopleSoft. Not tiles, not menus, just search. Anytime, anywhere. So I want to take it a step further. You see, on Mac, I can type in Command and Space to open what they call Spotlight. And on Windows with new power tools, you can do the same thing. I want the same feature in PeopleSoft. Let's see what it takes to make this happen. So here I am in PeopleTools 859, and we can see right up there at the top is the search to search the global menu. Now, I could, of course, drill into a tile to launch a business process or use the navigator, but the new way to navigate is through search. So if I want to go somewhere, I'll type in something related to where I want to go, and Elasticsearch will filter the list and then display the target for me. So let's say that we drill into somewhere within the application. So here I am looking at a fluid component, and no longer is search at the top, but instead it's behind the magnifying glass. And of course, I can click and pop it open, but I want to still keep my hands on the keyboard, just like Command Space, maybe perhaps with Control Space in the browser. I want to invoke the search action, have it open just like Spotlight would in a Mac. What would it take to make that happen? So let's do this. Let's inspect the item. Let's find out what it takes to invoke that action. I can see that here in Fluid, it has an ID. So we'll copy the ID, and then in the console window, how about document.getElementById, the ID that we want, and then just try to invoke click. And fantastic, that opens search. That's perfect. Okay, so now I'm curious, what would that look like on Classic? I mean, the header looks the same, but is the HTML structure the same? So let's try this. Let's open a new window, and then through search, let's do that. Let's go to structure and content, which would be Classic. And let's inspect the HTML. And so I'm going to right click, inspect again. And we see that although the structure is the same, the ID is different. So we're going to have to, in the JavaScript that we write, make a decision. If we're on Fluid, look for this ID, or if we're in Classic, look for that ID. Now there's another challenge in Classic that we don't have with Fluid. In Fluid, we have one single HTML document, and the search bar is in the same frame, everything. Whereas in Classic, we have two separate frames. We have the main transaction frame, and we have the header frame. And from the main transaction frame, where the focus is primarily going to be as you're working through the transaction, we need to invoke the click on the top frame. So here we see that, in this case, Fluid would be slightly easier versus Classic, which would be a little bit more challenging. Now, we have one other challenge we have to solve, and that is, how are we going to inject our custom JavaScript? So we know this is going to take custom JavaScript to invoke the click action. How are we going to get that into the PeopleSoft user experience? This is where Classic may be a bit easier. See, with Classic, we have branding system options, but not with Fluid. Fluid doesn't give us an opportunity to globally inject JavaScript. So instead, we may have to work with a customization. And if we're going to make a customization, we want to minify the impact. So let's keep that in mind. So the first question is, what would we customize? What we need is a carrier, some common JavaScript definition that exists between both Classic and Fluid that we can use to carry our JavaScript down into the user interface. So let's do this. Let's go to sources. Let's see what we can find. So I can see all the .js files. These are all HTML definitions stored in Application Designer. And I can see PT common. That sounds good. Then I also, let's keep going. PT save warning. Oh, the save warning, you see that everywhere. That sounds reasonable as well. And if we look at these sources here in Fluid, we see PT common, but not PT common, it's PT common F mode. And then we see PT save warning. Now, PT common F mode, that's for Fluid, not for Classic. So what do we see in Classic? We see PT common. Now we do see PT common F mode, but I'm pretty confident that's the header. And if we were to reload this as a PSC URL, I think PT common F mode would drop off the list. I'm not comfortable with that one. I don't think that's going to get us what we want. But that PT save warning, what about that? We see PT save warning in Fluid and PT save warning in Classic. That sounds like a good JavaScript definition to use for a carrier. So let's open that in Application Designer. There it is, PT save warning script. Fantastic. How big is it? Oh, 1,388 lines. When we upgrade People Tools, this is a People Tools definition. If we modify this definition, it's going to fall through. It's going to show in a compare report as modified. So I'm a bit concerned about that. So we want to minify the impact. I don't want this compare report that's going to show Oracle's changes and my changes, and me have to try to figure out how to weave them together. So I have an idea. How about we put our custom code in its own HTML definition? So how about new HTML? And our JavaScript, what it needs, we know it's find an element, click it. If that element doesn't exist, find the other one. So is it fluid? Is it classic? And then we need to wrap that in an event listener, listening for a particular key press. So I already wrote that HTML, JavaScript, and we'll be sure to share that with you. So I have my add event listener on keydown. I'm listening here, in this case, for the control key along with the space. Feel free, of course, in your implementation, if you choose to implement this, to change the modifier to whatever you prefer, as well as to whichever key you would like. And here I kept this simple. We're going to search for the fluid. If we don't find the fluid, let's search for the classic. If we find those, if we do have an element, then let's go ahead and invoke the click. Otherwise, we'll just ignore it and say, maybe Spotlight isn't available in this circumstance. So save, let's give it a name. How about our site-specific prefix? And this is modeled after the Mac Spotlight. So how about Spotlight? And because it's a JavaScript definition stored in HTML, we'll give it the suffix of JS to identify to anyone who comes after us. This is, in fact, JavaScript. Okay, back to the Oracle delivered definition. So we need to inject our JavaScript in some way. And so we'll do that using meta HTML. And then we want this HTML definition. To avoid typos, we will just drag and drop. Perfect. We'll save. Okay, all we have left to do is test it out, see if it works. So back on these pages, let's reload. Should download a new version of PT Save Warning. Let's hit the control space and see what happens. Oh, isn't that fantastic? There it is, Spotlight. Okay, what about in Classic? Let's reload. Oops, that was here's our opportunity to test to see if PT comment F mode does show up when we're in. Sorry about that. Let's go back to the PSP portal because that's where the search is. We're not going to find it in the PSC URL, so it wouldn't work there. Okay, so down in the transaction region, I'll press Control Space, and sure enough, there is Spotlight as well. Do you have more ideas for improving the PeopleSoft user interface? If so, share details in the comments below. We love to hear about your projects. Now, JSM Pros, we teach people tools and web development concepts like this every week. Be sure to check out our website to see what we're offering next. Or here's an idea, subscribe to our LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter feeds to receive updates every time we post a course. Or do you have a team that wants to learn more? Give us a call and let's get something scheduled. Now, before we go, I have a question for you. Do you have a topic you would like us to cover in a future soundbite? If so, let us know by sharing your idea at soundbites.jsmpros.com. Now, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more content. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.